Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, presented and brought to you by FanDuel. I am solo tonight here live on YouTube and releasing the podcast later on Wednesday morning. We have a lot of topics to get to here tonight. One of them I did not include, even though it is, kind of a big topic for a certain team out there, but we will talk about that here in just a minute as we begin the show a little bit. We have a lot to get to here with the Big Ten Huddle. We have the NFL speaking out on college football and a possible Big Ten NFL partnership on the horizon. We'll talk through some of that stuff. Lincoln Riley taking shots at the SEC. And then did the Big Ten reject Notre Dame? Jim Phillips came out today and had some comments, and it seems like Notre Dame is with the ACC for the foreseeable future. So we'll see how that works out. But very interesting stuff as we are going to cover it all. Let's go to the comments and see who we got with us. Philip here says September 16th, 2026, the day that Zach is dreading his beloved Kent State versus second favorite team, Ohio State. September 19th, he says. My bad. Yes. Zach will be so sad that he has to watch his two teams, Kent State and Ohio State, face off. Who will he ever root for there in the ILL there, Philip? Appreciate you being here, and everybody else who is here as well. We appreciate you being here, whether you're listening with us live or you are after the fact on YouTube or on podcast. We appreciate that. Please do like, subscribe, do all that good stuff for us. Definitely going to help out the show and help more people find the show. And then also comment your thoughts down below as well. I got to be honest. I totally spaced on the picking the home field winner today. I still plan on doing it. I just continue to forget. So that is my bad. I apologize, but I will pick that and I'll go ahead and announce that on the next live stream when we do that, and just keep letting you guys know. So my bad. Sorry about that, but we will pick that. I got to go through and compile every single comment and everything. So it does take a little bit of time, but I will get that done. Had a pretty busy day today, especially getting the show ready. So Trojan Fight says, what's happening, JR? What's happening, Trojan Fight? Going to be talking about your Trojans here in just a minute as Lincoln Riley took a shot at the SEC. And as you know, we always love when that kind of stuff happens. So we're going to talk about that for sure. But I do want to start with this whole Big Ten NFL discussion going on out there. So let's start here. All right. The Big Ten is on a journey to not only be the most premier conference in college football, but also the conference that provides the most talent, aka the pipeline to the NFL, you might be able to say. Now, one thing that's not been discussed a lot out there in the media and stuff like that is that there's been some chatter, some buzz behind the scenes that the Big Ten's been rather aggressively trying to move much more toward the pro style type of system and everything else with their type of play and their conference and everything that they do there. So one thought process has been, well, what if they get into some type of agreement or partnership with the NFL? And so with that happening, there was some discussions today because obviously the nationwide footprint that we've talked about here on the show before has been mentioned multiple times, making this more of an NFL-like type of league and stuff, and going through those similarities and how they can operate there. And obviously, as we've talked about here, the Big Ten wants to continue to expand and become more nationwide. They did not want to end with USC and UCLA. They continue to add Washington and Oregon. And as we know, they're most likely going to go to the ACC and add some more at some point with some years down the road once the buyout begins to decrease with those ACC teams, providing everything stays the same. But, that kind of stuff happening. And we'll talk more, a little bit of conference realignment stuff in the ACC here at the end of the episode in the third segment there. But basically, the Big Ten not only wants to be like the NFL, but they want to partner with mutual benefits to the NFL, positioning the Big Ten as the top pipeline while solving many of the challenges that are presented in the college football game today. Now, if you have been paying attention to the Super Bowl coverage at all, you know that Commissioner Roger Goodell did meet with the media on Monday and talked with them about some of the things going on, and obviously in the NFL, the Super Bowl. But one media member, I assume they must have heard some of this chatter behind the scenes with the NFL possibly getting more involved with college football, maybe the Big Ten being a partner, a potential partner for that whole situation. So we asked, what are your thoughts on what's going on in college football, and do you think that the NFL could help out? Well, Roger Goodell's quote says, quote, "There's obviously been a lot of change going on and a lot of disruption, and they do need to bring some clarity to it." He goes on, "If for some reason we could be helpful with the right people, we would obviously be willing to engage with anybody." All right. So I think that's really important to understand kind of what he's talking about there. Obviously, didn't give a huge long answer, and they didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. He's there to talk about the Super Bowl, the NFL. And so not a whole lot of people continue to ask about it. But the idea from the quote of the NFL being ready to engage if invited is the perfect setup for this Big Ten partnership. If so, the Big Ten does want to pursue it because Goodell obviously wants the college football game to work and to go well. Not because a lot of people think they wouldn't want that because they're competition to the NFL, but in reality, the college football game works very well with the NFL and gives them a lot of what they want. And Roger Goodell has a history of trying to implement NFL practices into college football with professional development, like the NFL Coach Outreach Program that has expanded to impact about 60% of FBS programs. But obviously, they don't want to just be involved in 60%. They want to get more involved in all of college football and the FBS specifically. And what better way to do that than with partnering with a conference to make something like that happen? And the college game continues to evolve and be more like the NFL than it ever has before. And I know this isn't going to be very popular to some people because they say, well, we don't want the NFL, we want college football. And there are certain aspects of college football that will never go away and still make it college football, but there are aspects of the game that are currently changing and becoming more NFL light. Obviously, direct compensation for players, revenue sharing, it models the NFL kind of salaries and how players get those. Obviously, it's not the same, and the college football is much messier, and that's something that they would probably want to try and fix at some point. And if the Big Ten did bring in the NFL, they might be able to have some of these contracts be more ironclad. And although the Big Ten does seem to have the most ironclad contracts in college football, look at the example of Damon Williams, there is still improvement of where they can get better, especially seeing the way things have played out with other players this cycle, like a Darian Mensah. There is free agency in college football, right? The transfer portal, it's kind of akin to the NFL roster moves and everything else. And you're seeing rosters being flipped over in college football, not at the same rate that they are in the NFL. About 60% of NFL rosters generally change from year to year. You're not seeing quite that much in college football at some of the bigger programs, but when a coach leaves or whatever else, you are seeing more and more of this. And heck, in college basketball, you're seeing entire teams enter the transfer portal and get away. And for like it happened to Indiana this year, they had to bring in an entire new team to come in and play there, which obviously is not exactly the most fun thing in the world for the fans who enjoy getting to know these players, rooting for them, seeing them progress and develop, things like that. The game is becoming more like NFL football as well. The technology in it with, the communication to the quarterback and everything else, the rules, the game structure, that's becoming more NFL light. And then also, I know nobody wants to talk about it happening, but it is happening that the playoffs are becoming more like the NFL as well. Now, I don't think you're ever going to get the, size of the playoff percentage of college football like they do with the NFL or anything like that, but they're talking about 16, 24 teams in the college football playoffs, and that does, replicate some of what you see in the NFL with them having about half of their league in the playoffs. But again, you're not going to have that same percentage going on there. So the Big Ten leader in charge, Tony Petitti, obviously he likes the model of the pro leagues. He comes from the MLB. He's a former executive there in the MLB, and he's obviously pushing for a larger playoff and wanting more of this NFL type of stuff to happen, not just in the Big Ten, but in all of college football overall, because it does, give them more money. Again, not saying I want this to happen, just giving you, what's going on and what Tony Petitti is kind of going for. All of it is revenue focused. All of it is focused on markets and how can schools make more money so they can pay players and have more success and make more money for the entire conference. There is a Power Four priority here, obviously. But even though there are two conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC that do get kind of more favor and have more dominance, you are still seeing a bit of an NFL structure with four major conferences, similar to kind of how you have divisions in the NFL. You are seeing, again, at a much larger scale, some of that in college football as well. And like I said, the NFL has a vested interest in college sports, in college football overall. The NFL cares because it's an unmatched farm system that everybody else does not have. The NBA has college basketball to a certain extent, but they also have the G League and how that whole thing works out for them. The MLB has their farm system, but it's not nearly as popular or lucrative as college football in the way it is. And so the NFL sits here at a spot where they have essentially free development. They get fan loyalty coming with many of these players to the NFL, which brings a lot of people to not, maybe they don't watch the games a ton, but they're buying jerseys, they're buying gear, they're buying merch. And you might be a Cleveland Browns fan, but if Carnell Tate is drafted by the Tennessee Titans, then you might watch some more Tennessee Titans games, right? So the coach the overall situation is a farming system, and it is a farming system for coaches as well, as many coaches do kind of earn their stripes in college football and make their way up to the NFL. Not all of them, obviously, they can start in the NFL and do the Arthur Smith thing and stuff like that as well. But there are coaches that go, Jeff Hafley is one. There's a multitude of other coaches who started in college football, got to the NFL, and have either stayed there or spent a long time in the NFL. And so the current NFL support makes sense, but not everybody is as involved with the NFL support as you might think. There is actually a conference that does have an NFL partnership with their conference, and that is the Big 12. They have a partnership with the Big Ten, which does not make this to be something that is super unlikely. The Big Ten could possibly get into an even greater partnership, as right now the Big 12 is in a partnership that essentially helps them with officiating, analytics, and trying to grow their conference more globally, as that's what the NFL has been doing a lot with London, Mexico, different places like that as well. But the Big Ten doesn't want just that. They want to be the premier pipeline that goes from the Big Ten to the NFL. They are not content with just dominating college football and winning national championships. They also want the NFL to recognize them as, this is where we're going to get the majority of our players. This is where players should want to go if they do want to play in the NFL someday, which obviously, if that happens, you're going to get the most talent in all of college football, which would make you likely the most prominent, most dominant conference in all of college football if you have the good coaching to go along with it. Now, this partnership blueprint is not, it's kind of like the Big 12 one on steroids a little bit. Now, we don't know everything that it would entail, but we do know that the Big Ten has a few areas where they feel like they could see some help and working with the NFL. One of them, like I mentioned earlier, contracts and trying to figure out, okay, how do we get these players signed to contracts so that way they're able to work these things out? Is there a way that we can get collective bargaining so that way it works out for all of college football? And the Big Ten would try to lead that race to get everybody more involved. And then obviously the global growth, the officiating, things like that we talked about. Player development as well is something that the Big Ten would be interested in here to try and get their players to be more likely to move on to the NFL. And of course, if your players are more likely to move on to the NFL, that makes you more likely to get the most talented players in all of college football. So it's a mutual win-win for both sides. And at this point, there's no for sure that it's going to happen or anything, but there is chatter going on that something like this could happen between the Big Ten and the NFL. And if it does happen, it would obviously be very good for the Big Ten. And it's just one more way that Tony Petitti is working outside the box. The public capital situation with UC Investments was one thing that they were kind of doing. And this other thing with the NFL trying to work out a way that they can both mutually benefit from one another, create the most talented conference in college football, and also, give them a step up above other teams would be super beneficial for them. Again, not saying we necessarily want college football to turn into the NFL or anything like that, but if we're being honest about where college football is going and how the Big Ten has presented themselves, they do want to be more kind of NFL light. And if they make that happen, you could see a partnership with the Big Ten and the NFL coming in the future. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. If you're in the chat with us, let me know what your thoughts are, but it would be very interesting for something like this to happen, and it could drastically change college football. And to my knowledge, this is not the only conference that the SEC is looking at doing this with. The Big 12 is not super special in that way, but it does sound like the Big Ten is interested in doing something like this, which would be very beneficial for them, especially if they're the only conference that's doing it. Philip says the NFL at least values college football compared to the NBA, pulling kids right away instead of having them build brand in college. Yeah, exactly. And Roger Goodell also mentioned that. I appreciate you saying that, Philip. Roger Goodell also mentioned that in the press conference before the Super Bowl, that he does think that there is a whole lot of value seeing players be able to grow, their brand and also mature themselves, mature their bodies before they come into the NFL. And really, when you see more players sticking with a school that does proper development for the entire time and not hopping around, you're seeing players that are more ready to perform right away getting into the NFL. And as we know, the NFL draft is very popular, not just because of the college players going into it, but also because a lot of these players have an opportunity to play right away. You're going to see them on the field. But the last few years, if you look at the rookie numbers, the rookies have actually played less snaps the past few years. And there's been a thought process that that's possibly due to the transfer portal and players not being developed quite as well, specifically quarterbacks not being developed quite as well, taking them more time. If you notice a guy like Bryce Young, he did not have the most success in the world when he first got to the NFL, but over time, he's having more success. Caleb Williams was similar as well. Didn't take him as long, but he's been similar as well. And so it's just a very interesting situation to see how all of this is going to work out. But would love to know what you guys' thoughts are. Appreciate you with that there, Philip. We definitely appreciate it. All right, one more thing before we move on. Michael Hogg says, hey, how are you doing tonight, John? I have to ask when you're going to talk more about the Big Ten schedule more in depth, as I see you have already given the KOD to Purdue. Yeah, we'll talk more about the Big Ten schedule when Zach gets back. I don't want to I don't want to talk too much about it without him here, just because that is something that he obviously enjoys talking about. So once Zach gets back, he will not be here on Sunday. I believe he'll be back a week from today on the 10th. So I'm sure we'll talk more about the Big Ten schedule at that point. But just want to, talk more about it with Zach and not, hog up all the time for myself. It's a long off season. We'll definitely be there, but thanks for being there, Michael. Thanks for being here, Michael. Appreciate it. All right. We're going to hit a break really fast. We'll be right back. We'll talk about Lincoln Riley and his shots at the SEC. All right. Let's see. Here we go. Lincoln Riley had some thoughts that he was giving to the SEC in an interview on television that he did with Colin Cowherd. Now, Lincoln Riley was talking about the parity going on in college football and how great it is for college football and how much more interest there is in college football. And when he was asked about why this might be happening, he said it's not just one part of the country that's paying players anymore. Obviously, a subtle jab at the SEC and what they've had going on for years upon years. And so Lincoln Riley is obviously on this boat with everybody else who says the SEC has been paying players. Now, it is a little interesting coming from, a USC head coach, obviously Reggie Bush and that whole situation. We don't need to rehash all of that. But it's not like Lincoln Riley was the head coach that was there. And I even saw some people saying, well, Lincoln Riley was in the SEC. He would know all about it. No, he was in the Big 12. Oklahoma was in the Big 12 at that time. He was not in the SEC. Oklahoma joined the SEC 2 years ago. Lincoln Riley's been at USC. I think this is going to be his either fourth or fifth year. I'm forgetting at this point which one it is. I'm sure a USC fan, maybe Trojan Fight. If you're still there, let me know how many years he's been there. But overall, Lincoln Riley decided to take a shot at the SEC and talk about how parity is much greater in college football now because essentially everybody is able to pay players, and it's a great thing. He said this post NIL kind of revenue sharing era, it's providing a lot of recruiting shifts and things that are going on, and USC is benefiting from that. Now, there's been a lot of thought process about USC, how much they're paying players, are they staying within the revenue share and everything else, and all I have to say to that is at this point, there are no real rules to the revenue share. There's almost like a suggested number of $20.5 million, but you've seen probably the LSU contract to Sam Levitt and everything else where they say, well, if we're going to stay within the revenue share, here's how much money we give you. But if we go over and beyond that, essentially, here's how much money we'll give you because this is the way of college football right now. There is nobody enforcing these rules. There's nobody being super tight with these things. And so it is providing basically a wild, wild west of college football where everybody can pretty much pay anybody as much as they see fit. And for a lot of teams, they don't like that as much. But obviously, the Big Ten is thriving in this area. USC was thriving on the recruiting scene. This class to be able to sign one of the better classes, and it's not just because of money. Money is obviously a huge thing, but it's not just because of money. It's also because they had a lot of in-state talent. Obviously, Chad Bowden came in and wanted to really prioritize recruiting and wanted to get that going on, get that happening, and they have fantastic recruiters on their coaching staff as well that they have there. So we'll see exactly how this works out for USC, but Lincoln Riley is exactly right that there is more parity now in college football, and the SEC not being the only ones, or pretty much the only ones paying players, is making a huge difference as well. The SEC's kind of under the table paying culture was able to get them so much more talent than everybody else. In addition to that, where the talent is able to stay and work things out. The evidence of change is that you're seeing so many more contenders for the college or the national championship outside of the SEC. You're seeing the Big Ten with 5, 6, 7 national championship contenders. And honestly, you're probably only seeing the SEC have maybe 5 or 6 at this point. I saw somebody one time who listed 12 teams in the SEC that could contend for a national championship every single year. I thought that was ridiculous. He listed 5 Big Ten teams, and I said, what in the world are you thinking? It just didn't make any sense. Now, could some of those teams contend if they get maybe the right amount of talent together and get the right head coach? Sure, but you could say that for a lot of different teams out there. And so you're seeing more year over year national championship contenders outside of the SEC than we've seen in a long, long time. So USC, this is actually, regardless of the Reggie Bush stuff, which again, we're not going to get super into that. Lincoln Riley's kind of the perfect one to be saying this kind of stuff, right? Back in 2024, USC was able to upset LSU in the first game of the season. Everybody thought LSU was going to win that game, and Riley was able to beat Texas A&M and Mike Elko in their bowl game as well. They dominated them in the 2023 bowl game. I forget which bowl game it was, or 2024. Yeah, the 2024 bowl game. And so Lincoln Riley has a 2-0 record against the SEC since back then. Now, they lost to Utah, and that's unfortunate there in the bowl game that happened here. But Riley is able to take shots at the SEC because he's not losing to the SEC. What was also interesting, though, was that Chad Bowden and Lincoln Riley both spoke to the media, and they both talked about kind of expectations of where USC is at. And I do think that some of these comments by Lincoln Riley are playing into some of these expectations for USC and where they might be going this season too. Chad Bowden, he commented to the media in a press conference about USC and where they might be. And he said, at USC, you have to go to a playoff. He said, it is what it is. And so basically setting the standard to say, look, USC is not happy if we're not going to the playoff. The playoff is where we need to be. And there are some thoughts out there that USC is kind of like in playoff or bust territory this season, to see if something like that might go on, or if this is a situation where USC maybe that's not playoff or bust, but Lincoln Riley and his reputation out there at Southern California is going to be hurt if he is not able to get this team to the playoff, as they have invested a good amount of money through the transfer portal, recruiting, and everything else. Now, I personally think that USC has a very tough schedule this year, so I'm not going to hold it against Lincoln Riley all that much if in the very first year of his big recruiting class he doesn't go to the playoffs. But I do think you have an excellent opportunity here with Jada Mayava returning, King Miller, Wayman Jordan, some guys on the offensive line returning too. Now, you went out and got some wide receiver help there, and you also went out and got Gary Patterson as your new defensive coordinator. Hopefully, he'll be able to help out the Trojans as well. But Chad Bowden's making it clear that this is not a program that is, excited about 8-4 or 9-3 right now. This is a program that expects to make the playoffs, and if Lincoln Riley wants to make that happen, he has to help other people see that you can't have SEC bias. And it's a smart tactic, taking a jab at the SEC with the Big Ten narrative, because the SEC is going to start playing those 9 conference games next season, and there does need to be a thought process about the records that typically the SEC was able to have be inflated because of only playing 8 conference games to now. I mean, look back at last season, right? Would a team like Oklahoma, who was, what were they, 10-2 to USC being 9-3, if you add one more loss to that Oklahoma team because of one more conference game, that Oklahoma team's not in the college football playoffs, and they're probably honestly down similar to where USC was last year. If you take away one of USC's conference games, let's say they take away Oregon and USC didn't have to play that game, that team is most likely 10-2, and if they're not in the playoffs, they're very close to getting in the playoffs. Being Iowa certainly would have helped, and how they performed down the stretch. If they would have obviously not lost that Oregon game, that would have helped too. And so you start looking at the situation and say USC is in a much more favorable situation this year. Now the schedule is not working out all that well, but hopefully they'll get some grace for playing a tougher schedule and playing some of the best teams in the Big Ten, who has shown year after year, the past 3 years, that they're going to have a national championship team, or at the very least, a national championship contender that's going to be very highly regarded up there as well. So I think it's a strategy by Lincoln Riley to take a jab at the SEC, but I also think at the same time, Lincoln Riley sees what a lot of us do as well, which is that right now the SEC not as dominant as they used to be, and the SEC, when they aren't paying players and getting the best talent, they're struggling more than maybe they have been in the past. And again, you can say what you want about Reggie Bush and everything else and all that stuff, and you know what? If you say that, you're probably just proving Lincoln Riley's point a little bit more. But the guy wasn't at USC when that was happening, and so I don't really hold it against him now. I'm curious to see what you guys are saying in the chat and what your thoughts are. So yes, Philip, Northwestern has the schedule from hell this year, so not good for them. Let's see. Trojan Fight says the Big Ten did us no favors with the schedule. Just a coincidence. No team that plays USC plays a likely to be ranked team the next week before. Yeah, when you really get deep into the schedule stuff, some of the teams that USC is playing, like if you just look at the schedule, it might not seem like one of the toughest schedules in the Big Ten, but when you look deeper and see like Ohio State gets a bye before they have to go out and play USC and some of that kind of stuff, which is what needs to be talked about more when we talk about strength of schedules. That's something that nobody really talks. Everybody just wants to go into the analytics and say, well, if an average college football team had this schedule, what would their record be? Which is just not indicative of college football at all. Now, you're never really going to have a strength of schedule metric that is really all that accurate and indicative, because these are college age students who sometimes they're really mature and they're able to put it together, and sometimes they struggle with that. So it really makes it difficult. But I'm glad the USC fans are in here agreeing with me on it, because I am curious, if you didn't put it in there, what are your thoughts on USC and Lincoln Riley? Does he have to make the playoffs this year? Do you agree with Chad Bowden that it's USC, you need to make the playoffs? What are you guys' thoughts? So Dr. Fakin says, but if you can't beat Notre Dame, you have zero chance of beating two teams better than Notre Dame. I would talk about, what I said with Notre Dame early on in the season. Now, I obviously was advocating for Miami to be ranked over Notre Dame because they beat them. I don't necessarily think that means that Miami was for sure the better team. It's just Miami had the better resume. And, if you're going to have these games, you have to honor them. I do think Notre Dame was a team that improved throughout the season. You saw CJ Carr start to get more comfortable with his play, and Chris Ash started to, show out a little bit more there as defensive coordinator. So, that was a team that had a whole lot of new going around with it. So I hear what you're saying, Dr. Fakin, but I also don't think that it's always that easy to say, well, these teams, especially when it was very close games against Miami and Texas A&M, and arguably, Notre Dame should have beat Texas A&M in that game too. So, it is. I understand the sentiment, but I'm not sure I totally agree, because I do think also in college football today, one of the things I like about the playoff structure is that it does give teams more opportunity to develop throughout the season. And I don't think that was a luxury that Big Ten teams had as much before, with such developmental programs and growing and making teams better. That was something that the Big Ten did not have before, the ability to, continue to play throughout the year and get better. Obviously, that Iowa team at the end of the season probably would not have lost to that Iowa State team that they played at the beginning of the year, because they kept growing, they got better. They were able to beat Vanderbilt at the end of the year, but they weren't able to beat Iowa State at the beginning of the year, right? So I do think there's an aspect of growing, getting better, really good coaching. And Iowa is obviously one of the best developmental programs in the country. And so being able to put all that together, I realize it's a really long-winded answer for that kind of stuff, but I do think this structure of college football does help the Big Ten more, because it allows you to develop your team more and put them in a better position to win at the end of the year. So that's just me, though. I want to make sure I don't miss any of these comments you guys got. So, all right. Philip says I'm still waiting for USC to play a snow game. Yeah, they're gonna have to at some point. But you don't get as much snow in the Midwest in November. Every now and then you will. Like if they go up to Wisconsin for a late November game or something, they might. But you don't get as much of it. So, but of course, the SEC still doesn't want to come up and play. Actually, they're getting better. I will give them credit. They're getting a little bit better. So, all right. Hey, let's do one more thing. We are going to continue to talk about Notre Dame here in the next segment, as Notre Dame was very unhappy with the ACC last year around college football playoff times, but it seems like the tune has changed a little bit. Is that because of something else going on out there in college football? We'll talk about it. We'll be right back. All right. Remember back when Notre Dame missed the playoffs and Pete Bavacqua said the relationship between the ACC and Notre Dame is permanently damaged? Well, ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips filled us in on the updates with his interview that he had with Brett McMurphy of On3. So Notre Dame's unique setup with independence in football, but a kind of a scheduling agreement they have with the ACC, led them to being upset with the ACC this season, with Duke and Miami, and we'll talk about some more of that stuff later on. But it led Pete Bavacqua to say, the relationship between the ACC and Notre Dame has been permanently damaged. Today, we'll break down Phillips' comments, why Notre Dame was frustrated with the ACC, and how the Big Ten stance of forcing them toward full membership or nothing is impactful in this whole thing right now. So let's get to the comments first. Jim Phillips, talking with Brett McMurphy, was asked about the whole Notre Dame situation and how things have been smoothed over since then. He said, quote, "We're in a really good place with Notre Dame, and a reconciliation is something that's important in my life and in others, and you're not always going to see eye to eye in every situation with everyone." Phillips said on Tuesday, "I really feel we handled it very professional and in a respectful manner." And another portion of the article, written about the interview, it was written that Pete and I got together, Phillips said. "We talked quite a bit, but we got together a week after the public discourse and had a great conversation. Since then, I've seen Pete and Father Bob and talk with them. It makes the relationship stronger to me when they go through some difficult periods. We all learned quite a bit. Now, that sounds rosy and nice and everything that, oh, well, they're obviously getting together now. And the relationship between the ACC and Notre Dame is stronger than it's ever been before. But I'm not personally buying that all that much, right? I mean, you had Pete Bavacqua coming out here, and maybe Pete's just more of an emotional guy who kind of comes out and says stuff with some more fire. I don't know. I don't know Pete Bavacqua personally. I don't talk to him on the phone or anything like that. But if this whole situation is as bad as Notre Dame let it on to be, it doesn't sound like just two people not seeing eye to eye, and maybe they had some public discourse and were able to stow it away in about a week or anything like that. You can forgive, but just because you forgive does not mean you forget and try to take course going forward in your life and whatever you're trying to protect out there. And obviously, Pete Bavacqua and their administration is trying to protect the Notre Dame brand. Now, Notre Dame was obviously upset with the ACC for multiple different things. The biggest one was they had perceived favoritism toward Miami to be making the playoffs. Miami was out there. The team that was most likely going to, or the team that Miami was the team that played Notre Dame, and they were the team that they were showing that game on repeat of. If you go back to that whole situation, the ACC social media accounts were even posting graphics comparing the resumes of Notre Dame and Miami in those situations, and Notre Dame wasn't very happy with it. They also have not been very happy with the ACC. This wasn't necessarily after the college football playoffs or anything like that, but they have not been happy with the ACC because they've wanted bigger matchups. And while they did get some of what they wanted, they need some of these bigger matchups to happen for their TV contract because Notre Dame is not in a TV contract where they just get paid the same amount every single year, similar to how some Big Ten teams do. They do have their viewership looked at and what they are able to bring to the table of NBC and everything else. And when you are only playing 5 of 17 ACC teams, and the ACC really only has 1 or 2 major contenders. I mean, Miami this season was a major contender, and that was about it. I mean, Pitt looked okay for a portion of it. Virginia, they could have been a playoff team, possibly Georgia Tech, but really the only team you had in that conference, at least without the playoffs playing out, looked to be Miami. And so the thought process there of really you're this is the only team you have, and we just scheduled to play teams like Clemson and Florida State more often. It does. It is something that Notre Dame needs to think more about, especially when they have a TV contract that is their main source of revenue for them. But it does require them to play these big games with larger viewership, so that way they're able to make it out. And then also there were rumors out there that Notre Dame was not exactly thrilled with the strategic mismanagement of the conference with a team like Duke, who lost to a G5 team and in Tulane, and a team that did not have every single conference game count against their conference record, was able to make the ACC championship game, win it, and then be left out of the playoffs because a group of 5 team was ranked higher than them. And so the Notre Dame is overall looking at the conference, at least at that point in time, saying, yeah, things are not looking super well right here, right now. And I highly doubt that all of these things were just, all coalesced and all agreed upon and, rainbows and roses all after just one little conversation that Jim Phillips had with Pete Bavacqua. Sounds like this is much deeper about what was going on after the season, during the season, and concerns about the management and everything else of the ACC moving forward. There is a thought process out there that Notre Dame tested the waters with the Big Ten for a hybrid deal with the ACC, and we've talked about this before. This is something that could possibly happen because of the relationship that Notre Dame has with NBC and the relationship that the Big Ten has with NBC. And so, if these two groups got together, you could see something work together. But from what rumors and reports and things like that out there indicate, is that the Big Ten's response in all of this was a flat no. this is not happening. We are not going to get into a partial relationship with you, a partial scheduling agreement. If you want to join the Big Ten, you need to actually join the Big Ten. And for various reasons, the Big Ten would not budge on this. They want revenue equality. They don't want to have to pay Notre Dame a little bit, and they also don't want Notre Dame profiting off of the Big Ten, similar to like what I've talked about before, where the Big Ten doesn't want ESPN and other groups profiting off of their teams and them not profiting off of the other team. Also, conference unity. Either you're in, you're out. Don't either be here, don't be here. And then also, rivalry history. So are you actually coming here to be in the conference, or do you just want an excuse to play your rivals more often? Obviously, USC would not be very happy if they had a scheduling agreement with Notre Dame not happen, and then they all of a sudden get put on Notre Dame's schedule again for them to play a game later on in the season that doesn't actually count as a conference game. So all of these things work together for the Big Ten to not actually be all that interested in any type of scheduling agreement like what they have with the ACC. And right now, Notre Dame does want to try and get out there and do some more of these scheduling agreements, try to figure something out. There was a rumor out there that they've been trying to do something similar with the SEC. Ever since the SEC said, look, you can play one Power 4 out of conference game or Notre Dame out of conference. So the core philosophy here is that Tony Petitti, he has a vision for the Big Ten being elite, unified, and have no exceptions for anybody unless you're a full-time member. They want to have a massive TV deal. They want to have, at one point they wanted to have automatic playoff bids. They want to have a recruiting boost, all of these things. And a team coming in and having, a partial membership does not reflect all of those things, especially when you have one group, at least one group in your conference going through a scheduling issue with that team because they're not a team in the conference and they don't want to play them later on in the season. And I know there's more into the USC Notre Dame stuff. We're not getting super deep into that in this whole thing, but it does highlight that the Big Ten and the Notre Dame are not really all that close to putting anything together. It does sound like Notre Dame is probably going to have to start losing out on major TV money and losing out on situations where they make the playoffs in order for this to happen. But doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon, as Notre Dame is still being able to schedule teams and they're out of conference. They are looking like they can schedule SEC teams out there as well. That's going to help them with their TV contract and making some of that stuff. And then also too, with the agreement that they're going to be in the playoffs, as long as they're a top 12 team, that's going to make things very beneficial for them as well. So was Notre Dame rejected by the Big Ten? Not necessarily. I think if Notre Dame came to them and said, we want to be a full member of the conference, I think the Big Ten would say yes, and they would be excited about that. But they don't want to play this game of back and forth of, well, we're going to have some scheduling stuff here, but not really here. And I think that's ultimately what led to Notre Dame saying, you know what? I don't really agree with the ACC, but we got to get the scheduling stuff figured out. Until we get something figured out with somebody else, or we figure out how to make our schedule better and more consistent, we're just going to stick it with the ACC here and keep having our scheduling agreement with playing teams like Florida State and Clemson more often work out there. So curious what you guys' thoughts are in the comments. What do you guys think about what's going on? Rook says, why would the SEC or Big Ten ever schedule a game with Notre Dame again? Notre Dame is already Big Ten hockey and ACC for every sport but football. You guys aren't special. Well, that's what I was saying, is that they don't want to schedule them. So, right. I don't know why you're coming at me and saying they aren't special or anything. In fact, or you're saying Notre Dame isn't special. Okay. All right. I just caught that now. Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame is a brand that would present a lot of TV revenue for a lot of these teams and for their opportunity to play them. So if you're playing Notre Dame at your place, then yeah, you're actually, that would be beneficial for the conference to be able to, have a Fox Big Noon kickoff of, Ohio State, Notre Dame, or something like that if they want to do that. But the problem is on the flip side, and it's like what we talked about with Ohio State canceling the games or planning to cancel the games against Alabama and Georgia. I don't think it's actually, been announced and happening yet, but it sounds like that's the plan for that to happen. Is that, they don't want to basically shell out their top brands for free to other people to make money on them, but for them not to make money on it. So, it all comes back to money and everything else. I don't understand why the ACC included, or the ACC, why the SEC included them on it. The SEC is being run very poorly right now with their scheduling and everything else. I appreciate that they want to have an out of conference game because as a fan, I do want to see those. But overall in college football, like an out of conference P4 matchup just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And maybe they do have something going on with Notre Dame that we just don't know about yet. But I'm with you, Rook. It other than making some money off of one game, it's not all that special to play them, especially when you're risking not playing your conference team and stuff like that. So I'm with you. So Max says, could you imagine Notre Dame and Purdue or Michigan games, heated rivalries? Oh, they did play Purdue the past 2 years. Those ones were not as heated. But yeah, listen, I miss seeing the Notre Dame Michigan games also a lot. Yeah, and USC too. Like I miss seeing those. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I do want Notre Dame to join the Big Ten is because obviously regionally it does make sense and everything else. And then also, I mean, these are rivalries that we just don't see anymore, right? And who knows the next time we're going to see Notre Dame USC. It sounds like they're not done for good. Sounds like they could work something out to play again at some point. But yeah. And Dr. Fakin, don't forget, started Notre Dame ducking Michigan. So you're a Michigan fan. Okay. Totally. And that's exactly what I pointed to when people were going after USC for, not playing Notre Dame and everything else. It's like, okay, well, Notre Dame also ducked Michigan. So like, why are we going to go after, USC here and call them soft and everything else when Notre Dame did the same thing to Michigan because Michigan was beating them too bad. They didn't want to play them anymore because they kept getting beat. Now, I don't know if that was actually the reason why, but it's sure what it looked like. And Dr. Fakin says they literally ran from us. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was just never really a fan of that whole situation and how that played out because it did feel like they ran away from them. But, at the end of the day, Notre Dame, they're obviously a huge brand, and if they were to join the Big Ten, I'd be all for it because, like I said, these rivalries and everything else, I want to see them happen. So, Dr. Fakin says it is the reason. So there you go. All right. What's it? Fight on that. He says take Notre Dame and UNC, and that's it. Yeah, Greg Flugar, my buddy over there at Peak Around the Corner, he is really on the North Carolina train. Made a video about it and everything. He thinks the Big Ten and the SEC are fighting over North Carolina a whole lot right now, which would make sense. I mean, it would make a whole lot of sense from everything. So, yeah, the Big Ten has offered full-time membership multiple times. They have. I mean, and that's the thing. They want them because they know that it would help increase their TV dollars and everything else too. So, yeah. All right. Hey guys, that's what I got for you in this episode here of the Big Ten Huddle. Really appreciate all of you being here and being with me. Sorry I didn't get to interact with the chat as much when Zach's not here. I'm just not able to, to see you guys and interact with you nearly as much as I'd like to because I am also on the show and running the show at the same time. But I appreciate you being here. Yes, Max, thank you for always reminding us. Please do hit that like button for sure. Comment if you're listening after the fact as well. Always helps us out. And Dr. Fakin, man, you are awesome. Give a $5 super chat. Give this to the scared Irish, he says. Yes, I'll make a donation. Don't worry to the scared Irish over there. Thank you, Dr. Fakin, for the $5 super chat. Really appreciate those and everybody else who, even if you don't super chat, just being here listening and spending your time here, really appreciate that too. So, Max says Zach suspended for another episode. One more episode, Zach won't be here. He's on vacation. He'll be back. But we'll see Zach again. Don't worry. So, all right. Hey, everybody, really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Big Ten Huddle. We'll see you next time. Sunday night is the next live stream I have scheduled, but I don't know. I might do another basketball one at some point. That went over really well on Friday night when we watched when we recap the Michigan State game. If there's another night that looks like I have some freedom there at the end, just be on the lookout and see if there's a live scheduled or anything later on in the night at some point. And you'll know we're going live to recap most likely a basketball game. So yes, Philip, basketball live show. I want to do more of those. They work best after games, because that's when people are the most excited about them and everything else. So they work best after games. We'll do a basketball live show at some point. Who knows? Maybe Sunday night, since Zach isn't here, maybe we'll do basketball power rankings. You were asking about that, Philip. So maybe we'll do that. All right, everybody. Have a good one. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.